Warning, this video contains some nudity. It's kind of hard to do a review about a naked woman who kills people if I don't show you a bit of that nudity. So just be warned. Welcome to J-Horror Oddities, a series dedicated to looking at the obscure and hard to find Japanese horror movies that no one ever talks about. Now, in our previous edition, we looked at an It clone, which is about a little girl whose imaginary clown gets revenge for her. Now, I present to you in this edition something a little bit more gritty and adult. You probably picked that up from the warning at the start of the video. The awfully titled Decay of the Person, a horror drama film about a young girl who grows into a young woman with a thirst for revenge against the living and the dead. Asuka Shibu, an actress known for her small TV parts, takes on the main role of Coco, a young woman who's developed a very strong sense of survival skills in a world that's now populated by the living dead and the deadly living. Now, this is a movie of two very clear parts. The first part sets up the story of Coco as a young girl, escaping to the mountains with her father and a couple of survivors, while the second part jumps 15 years into the future. The movie starts with an excited man thinking he's scored big by finding an unopened jar of booze, but his excitement quickly turns to horror when a strange sludge falls from the sky and turns him into a rabid monster. And that's how people are initially turned in this movie. There's no other explanation for it, nor do we ever find out what it is or where it came from, so we just have to accept it. We're then introduced to Coco and her lovely parents. They have a good family dynamic, and to use a word made cringeworthy by Reddit, they are wholesome. Oh god, do I really hate that word. It's in this opening scene where we're introduced to Coco's one and only idiosyncrasy. She likes to bite on her index finger when thinking. This becomes both important and highly annoying later on in the movie when it wants to remind you that this grown woman is the little girl from the start. Things turn real for Coco and her friend really quickly when a boy asks to meet her at a shrine after school. As Coco and her friend watch the boy squirming from a distance, he's then eaten by a zombie. At the same time, some creepy dude finds a good-looking but very much dead woman on the side of the road and takes her back to his apartment. Before he can pull her panties off and do God knows what to her, she comes alive and eats him. And that is the end of that guy. Meanwhile, Coco and her friend rush back to a small print shop run by Coco's mother's ex-boss. They've just escaped two teenage schoolgirls and an older man who have turned into zombies, and now they need to avoid the ex-boss, who is also being turned. But it's too late for Coco's friend, as she has a huge chunk taken out of her head. Coco's father manages to save the day, but leaves the friend behind. Escaping to safety, he gives Coco the sad news. Her mother's dead, and they need to get away from their home. They hitch a ride with a couple who want to go to the mountains to survive. And now, where the fun part of the movie begins. We jump forward 15 years time to see an attractive young woman cutting a chunk of meat which she then cures outside. Who is this woman and why is she doing this? But before we can find that out, let's unnecessarily watch her take a bath. Well, that was fun, right? If you'd have guessed that this girl was Coco all grown up, you'd be 100% right. Because even without her saying anything, and there's a good 15 minutes or so with no dialogue here, we know it's her because she does her signature finger bite. I also told you it would be her earlier on in the review. Coco is now a survivalist, and the movie moves into its survival phase. We now follow Coco as she travels around areas that for some reason she hasn't investigated any time over the last 15 years. She heads into homes and shops to find new clothes and rice. It's the ultimate shopping day. But this day is a little different. While camping for the night in an open field, which kind of confuses me because as a survivalist, I would assume that you would try to find a place that's a little bit more secretive and secure to spend the night in. She comes across a disheveled man who hasn't had a haircut or shave in a few months, but he's plump and well-fed. Every guy's dream comes true as Coco invites the stranger back to her house to stay. Firstly, He's excited to eat rice balls and random meat, which Coco never explains what it is. And secondly, his excitement continues as he watches her take a bath at night. But she's not dumb. She knows he's watching. And for those of you wondering if you're going to see more than just a dark silhouette bathing, well, hold on to your hats because the filmmaker's got you covered a little bit later on in the movie. This guy doesn't get the hint that he should leave. In fact, quite the opposite. He thinks Coco should be helping him pump out babies to repopulate the world. But she's not into that, and we find out why. A flashback to her teenage years shows that her father was killed by a gang of teen men who then used Coco as their own private sex slave. When Coco's house is visited by one of the members of the undead, she brutally and efficiently takes it down and then begins to prepare the body for eating. Yes, we find out that Coco has been eating zombie meat. Does this still make her a cannibal or not? Another flashback provides more context that her and the original group of survivors were experimenting with zombie meat to see if they could eat it. This bit is kind of a bit gross, but not as gross as the revelation that this man she took pity in is a bit of a Negan-style character who is also well versed with eating people. During yet another bathing session, he decides to approach Coco to have forced coitus. But she's not a delicate little flower. She's actually a brutal killer. And with her bow and arrow in tow, she takes him down efficiently, and using his technique to keep people alive to harvest their meat, she tries out the method on him. Fade out, movie's over, Coco wins. Well then, so where do we start with this film? Well, from a pure horror perspective, I think this is a bit of an interesting one because it's not quite a full-on zombie film, even though maybe it could be classed as one. The second half of the film, which focuses on the survival and revenge themes, have those basic elements of The Walking Dead and I Spit on Your Grave, maybe, combined together. Now, it's actually very unusual for these low-budget J-horror films to have nudity in them, and in such an abundance like this movie does, it feels like a bit of a throwback to the 80s and 90s where they would just splash nudity in those movies for just nothing more than titillation. Now, the pacing on this film, I think, is probably the biggest issue. Now, there's a lot of setup in the first half of the movie, but the directors kind of failed to provide to the audience any reason for anything to happen. It just happens. And that's it. So if you're comfortable with not knowing why this goo falls from the sky and why this goo is able to turn people into zombies, then that probably won't bother you. Also, if you need closure about Coco's mother and the other survivalists, well, you're not going to get that either. You're probably also going to question some of the survival elements, such as why she still has running water. At least the electricity thing is explained, although I think with all of that spare time that she has on her hands, she probably could have built a system that was a bit better than one solar panel and a car battery. I also got really annoyed at the fact that she keeps biting her finger all the time. You know, I got it the first time. You're Coco, you're the young girl. I don't need you, movie, to keep reminding me that that's who she is, especially since we only see little Coco do that once. But having said that, I think, what's her name? Asuka Shibu does a great job, especially since most of the time she's solo on the screen by herself. She's got no one else to really interact with, which is a bit tricky for an actor. And surprisingly, the guy that she does find later on in the movie that she does interact with, he's the actual director of the movie. So, there. Was the film fun? Well, yes, I think it was. And I think that's something that most people would enjoy if they were looking for something just a little bit different other than the normal Japanese zombie film. In fact, just the normal zombie film in total. So, using the patent pending ghost rating, which stands for great horror or stupid trash, I give this movie 3 ghosts out of 5. I think that it is slightly above average J-horror oddity. Most of the movies that we look at in this series are probably going to be about that 2 ghost rating. So this one being 3 ghosts is probably going to be an unusual score for a movie in this series. But it is something a little bit fun and something a little bit different. Sure, that first half of the movie probably could be improved a little bit, but you know, it's in the end, it's a bit of a survival movie that reminded me a little bit of I Spit on Your Grave without the constant sex throughout the whole movie. But if you've seen Decay of the Person, And I'd be very surprised if you have, but if you have seen it, what did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning into Shockmania. I am the Artident, and I've enjoyed bringing this review of Decay of the Person to you. Leave a comment below, press a like if you enjoyed the video. Otherwise, I hope to catch you next time where we're going to look at a movie about bullying.